CASJE, the Consortium for Applied Studies in Jewish Education, is envisioned as a coordinated effort to promote high-quality research that informs the policies and practices of Jewish education. By focusing research efforts around key questions, CASJE engages investors and practitioners in the generation of robust and usable knowledge for the field. One area of focus has been Israel education. Sometimes it seems as if Israel education in North America is an impossible task. On the one hand, the most powerful encounters with what Israel is and with what it might be take place in Israel itself. Often, those encounters are experienced through conversations and interactions with Israelis, or they take place within the context of family relationships.
Israel is like part of home. Growing up with, my mom and, grandparents that were very connected to Israel and grew up there and with a lot of family. Going there is like, going home.
The whole beauty of Israel is that when people go to Israel, even if they don't want to make Aliyah, I think they still feel some kinds of connection to the land. So even though it's not necessarily their home, it's still a type of home.
My parents really provided the groundwork for me to be supportive of Israel, have that, part of my views of Israel intact.
I don't really watch the news about it or things like that. I talk to my friends from Israel probably like twice a week on Facebook or Skype or whatever. So that's really how Israel plays a role in my life.
But the ideological content in much of Israel education means that young adults may be especially suspicious of the adults charged with teaching them, particularly sensitive to any hint of bias, and prefer to construct their conclusions themselves.
So I'll just Google Israel and I'll look up on the internet and try to find articles that seem relatively unbiased.
I don't really trust anyone else. Again, I don't regard my teachers as any more sources of information than I do anyone else, because they also have their personal biases.
A small little private school, it's very much, we're in a bubble. But then once I get into BBYO, these kids are all over the spectrum. Some kids are very pro-Palestinian, some are very pro-Israel, and it's a great place to discuss our opinions, because here we know the teachers are biased,
I mean, depends on what lunch table you sit at, but my lunch table, topic turns to Israel about, once a month. And there, at my lunch table, even of itself, the 10 of us, or 15 of us, whoever crowds around the tiny lunch table, everybody has different opinions, everybody argues, and we just discuss.
The CASJE Israel Education Working Group is exploring how applied educational research can help address these multiple challenges by asking, who are the educators that young adults are ready to trust to convey a sense of the complexities of life in Israel in a compelling fashion? Through what subject matter can we learn about Israel? For example, how can the study of Hebrew serve as a portal for understanding Israel? And what are reasonable goals for Israel education? What do educators mean by wanting young people to come to love Israel? And how is love cultivated? And how do we measure changes in thinking and feeling achieved through effective Israel education? Members of the Israel Working Group have written briefs that put forth some original answers to these questions and make the case for evidence-based research to pursue answers. We invite you to read the briefs, share your experience, and add your thoughts to the conversation at CASJE.com.